Put away your umbrellas, get out your mint cakes, hike to your nearest chair, pop in your headphones and get ready for the next episode of the Lakes International Comic Art Festival podcasts with your hosts, live from the Lakes, the practically perfect Nicole Bates, and don't get him angry, Ian Loxham.
Hello, welcome to the Lakes International Comic Art Festival podcast, episode 84. My name's Ian.
And I'm Nikki.
I nearly got it almost perfect.
Got it wrong.
No, not wrong. Just I'm
wrong.
I'm just showing that I'm a normal person and not this superstar that people think I am.
I was going to say, or a bot.
Welcome to episode, like those YouTube ones.
Hello and welcome to
just
episode.
Read Wikipedia and get hundreds of thousands of views.
That's what I was going to do.
What? Just read Wikipedia?
Yeah.
Because you're a bot as well. Right.
I am a bot.
On today's episode, we haven't got a guest because it sort of fell through. Mm-hmm. But luckily for us, Mike and Pete have got Gustavo on for a chat.
Lovely.
To talk about his new comic live on Kickstarter, PUNO. And other bits and bobs.
As well as what? Sorry?
Other bits and bobs. Tom is discussing Holly by Steven Ingram.
Lovely.
Whilst walking with the dogs, I think.
He's gone all Adam Buxton on us.
That's exactly what I said to him. He's stealing the Buxton.
Oh, he's doing the Buxton
He's stealing
walk.
the Buxton feeling.
Of course, Adam Buxton's in Norfolk, where it's flat, and Tom isn't. So is he out of breath in any of it? Because it's all uphill.
Up in hills. I'm doing my northern accent when he's far more northern.
I was going to say, and you are northern.
Yeah.
But you're doing a northern accent.
Well, I'm doing a Yorkshire accent because, let's be honest, that's not saying anything. Anyway.
A Lancashire lad doing a Yorkshire accent. I think you get burnt in a wicker man now, don't you?
As long as the other bits happen before that.
No, that's going to happen.
And we've got a few books to talk about.
We do.
But today is sort of the announcement, or following the day of the announcement of the next lockdown in England, not in the United Kingdom.
No, because Wales have done theirs. And they're like, we're fine, but we're not visiting.
It doesn't make sense.
None of it makes sense. Well, no, the
lockdown makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
But the fact we're not all together doesn't make sense.
No.
That's
okay.
a bit that doesn't make sense.
But it's okay. You can still go to Spain, catch it and bring it home.
I'll probably be locked down when you get to Spain. You just go and sit in your hotel room.
Oh, how awful.
And walk with one to a beach. Who knows?
It's raining here.
It's Kendall.
It's Kendall. It's absolutely tipping it down. I'm just having my cup of tea now.
So how are you feeling after the...
I was going to start my cup of tea then. You can't come in with emotional, how are you feeling?
Emotional.
I'm just about to stick my face in the tea.
Okay, well you have a slurp on that and I'll just sort of talk nonsense for a second because I was, my mind's now focused on one thing.
Okay.
So how was it feeling? How is it feeling?
Well, we went out this morning, didn't we, to get the weekly shopping?
We did.
In a non-panicky type of way. But unfortunately, everyone else is panicking out there.
It feels like it.
And I got a bit twitchy because it was very, very busy.
Well, I got twitchy because last time we talked about going to see Akira.
Yes, and you got twitchy. You got more twitchy than me.
And we decided not to go.
And because there's no point in going if you're not going to be comfortable. So I should have gone on my own.
I could have had an evening to myself.
So we didn't do that in the end because... No. You felt uncomfortable, and that's fine because that's how we're all feeling at the moment in a way.
Thank you to the Brewery Arts for putting our money back on the account. So,
so we will be...
We're not wasted it. We'll use it at some point in
the
future.
Yeah, it's a shame, we didn't do it. But I don't think we're alone in feeling this way.
No.
And I was getting really twitchy. And we went shopping at my work. So, somewhere where I'm quite comfortable at. But I was twitchy there because it was so busy. So
on a Sunday as well.
On a Sunday.
Should have all been at church.
Yes.
So we've got some books to talk about, and we're also going to look at the Thought Bubble online festival. We'll do that separately shortly.
Okay.
In a bit.
Yep.
We'll run down some of the guests on there and some bits to look forward to. Because obviously we've seen it done once.
Yep.
Well, a few places done it, but we've seen it done in a big scale with the Lakes.
Yep.
So it'll be interesting to see what Thought Bubble put forward as their version.
Yes, that's it.
So, we'll discuss that shortly. So let's look at some books first of all. Where do we start?
I start with trying to get the books from the cat.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start
with... Well, you've got the first one. So do you want to do the... Oh, you're going to go into...
No, it's fine. We'll go with this. I'm going with this one.
So this one is the Mimiad First Graphic Novel Competition winner from 2 years ago. The cat has just knocked him everywhere. Bloody hell. Professional we're not.
With me foot. That's the one you were going to talk about.
Professional were not. Right, I'll find it on here. Bloody hell. Anyway,
yes,
go ahead, darling.
Anytime.
What's the book and who's
called
it by?
Biscuits Assorted by Jenny Robbins. So I shall read the blurb a bit.
Okay, I'm glad you're organised and ready there.
Really not.
Nope.
Every day we pass 1,000 people in the street or squash up against strangers in the underground. Like every city, London is teeming with life. Diverse, beautiful, messy life. And every face seen fleetingly in the crowd carries a story or two. Some are sad, some are funny, some are boring, but none are ever quite what you would guess. I can't even read today. So anyway, this is looking at different women. I love the fact that every chapter has a cookie cut out of a woman, and then it's a woman is coming out of it, breaking out, because we're not all lumped together as it's just women or women who look a certain way, women who do a certain thing. We're all individual. And this book just takes snippets of stories. We come back to them each time. So we follow different people from different walks of life, doing different things, some just normal things, living their life, sometimes a bit more extraordinary, and we can all relate to that, to parts of it. And some which you can't relate to is really interesting to read about. So, such
as, in your case? Such as, what are you saying you can't relate to?
Well, there's there's a lady of colour who gets on a bus and she gets abused. Well, never. I'm going to come across, but we need to read about it and we need to know that this is happening, and there's another lady who dresses up as a unicorn and does burlesque. I don't do that, but I did used to dance burlesque.
You could do that.
I did go to burlesque classes. But they're fantastic people. There's fantastic women, and it's really interesting. And because you chop and change between them, and sometimes they interlink, which I love that bit as well. It is like, as they put in the blurb, actually, it's like eating a box of biscuits, but a box of biscuits. You sit there, I'll just have that one with a cup of tea. So you just read a little bit, put it down, I just fancy another biscuit now. So it is very much like that. So I love the artwork. It's busy. It's dynamic.
Could I just say, when you were saying about the biscuits, every time you said, I'll have another, I'm thinking of a different biscuit.
Yeah, well, that's it. It's
chocolate hobnob.
It's getting your foxes assorted for Christmas.
It's just the way biscuits just came in my head.
Your family circle, lovely. Jammy Dodger.
Other brands are available.
Shortbread, fantastic. It's got to be the jammy sandwichy one with the sugar. Or custard cream. Sorted, aren't you, with that? So it's very much like that. You sit there, you dip in, you dip out, and it keeps your attention really well. And I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Good.
So definitely one to get. Like I say, it's different walks of life, and it's always interesting to read that.
The one I'm just going to talk about, you can't get.
Oh, you can't get it now?
But I'm still going to talk about it because he does digital stuff, and he'll probably end up throwing it out digitally.
Well, you've told him now.
We better add to. John Tucker, Murder Volume 1. Now, John Tucker, I've talked about it before. His stuff is always original or something slightly different about what he does. You're trying to pick it up off the floor.
I've got it.
His stories are always slightly twisted, slightly odd in some way.
Yes.
And I love his style and his story writing because of it. Now, this one, the difference here is it's a A6. Little book called Murder Volume 1. And he's saying on his Kickstarter page, when I lived in Manchester, I was absolutely fascinated with the seemingly endless supply of handmade photocopier comics available in the city's artsy areas. I won't go into the full details there. And he sort of tried to get the spirit of that.
Which it is. With
2 short stories within the comic. And I just love his whole style and his whole ideas and his signed look.
I know it's signed. It's number 17.
Number 17, not number 1. We're never going to make millions of it.
No.
But it's such a simple idea that I'm fascinated by his mind and the way he creates stories. I really am. And I always look forward to what he's going to produce next. So if this does become available in some sort of set down the line, grab it, as well as the rest of his work. I do believe he's got all of his previous work in one digital bundle at the minute, still available for a very low price. So it's well worth grabbing that if you fancy it. But if you can, Murder Volume 1, John Tucker, or any of John's stuff, Just have a look.
Yeah.
Have a look.
Yeah, he does. He's outside the box, isn't he? And
He is.
like
He's
that.
always trying to do something different. Always trying to be original.
Yeah.
So it's cool. Right, we've got another Kickstarter one.
I have. So I've got Haru, Part 2
Go
by
on.
Joe Latham.
Do you want to say what you like in
No,
particular?
I'm going to say that's not why I like it in particular. I mean, it's lovely to have your name in it, but that's not why I like it in particular, because I love Joe Latham's work, and you know I love
I
Joe
know
Latham's
I do.
work.
I'm teasing you.
And personally, I mean, I've tweeted him and said if I could inhale his art, I would, because his artwork is just beautiful. It's like achingly beautiful. I think that is achingly. And I mean, we're following.
So this is part 2, isn't it?
This is
Yeah.
part 2. So grab part 1 if you can. Can you grab part 1? You can.
You can.
Yes, I'm sure you can.
He's not evil like John Tucker. He doesn't just throw it out there, then pull it away.
So we're in part 2. We're following Yama and Haru, obviously. God, I mean, just forgetting there, our main person. So we're following those two. They still go on the way to school. Hope you know, after part 1, where they're on the way to school.
It's a long way to go.
It's a very long way to go.
Long way to
Bless
go.
them, and actually get to school and talk. But I'm not even going into that bit. So, but it starts off with Todd. Todd, the mushroom man. Oh, he's just, everyone needs a Todd. I want a Todd. You need a Todd.
I love mushrooms when we fry up.
No, you wouldn't eat Todd. So we start off with Todd, because I know he was trying to get Todd into there as well, because he developed him. And it's just a lovely little setup for the whole thing. So we've still got the evil darkness of the heart from the Briar. It's still there, and it's now making itself felt. I don't want to say too much, because Joe's books are like watching Studio Ghibli. They're slow, they're beautiful, and it's building up, and I'm scared. Let's put it that way. I'm scared for them.
Difference is, I enjoy reading Joe's books. Ghibli's bore me a little. But anyway.
Don't make me hurt you. But yes, so definitely pick up Haru. I mean, it is
It is gorgeous. His
beautiful.
artwork is always amazing.
Look at, it's just so lovely. Haru is so gorgeous. I want a Haru. And I just want all of them, really. I mean, we just need all of them. So yes, I'm just flicking through it now. So
I know,
you can
it's
see the
just-
art. So, but yeah, just get it, just read it, just love it. Just buy
Yeah.
any of Joe's work, really.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a huge advocate for Joe. He's a lovely man, and his lovely heart comes out in his work.
Talking of work, which is not similar, but in a cutesy sort of style, it's not about work on Twitter. Keeps pumping out, which John Freeman, obviously bigly involved with the festival, got a nice original piece the other day, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
And
I've
it's
got original from him.
what I've. I mean, it's you that found or found him online and sort of
Yes,
start
yeah.
pushing it. I'm loving the way people are jumping on it.
I know. I
through
feel like
yourself.
I've been there from the beginning. But his work is beautiful. It's reminiscent of Quentin Blake, I think. But he has his own style. And it is, I mean, he puts on just where he draws with his inks and watercolours. And you just watch that and it's mesmerising.
I'd like to hear him talking. I think we need to ask him. I'd like to hear him talking about his work while he's doing it. I'd be intrigued.
He's just,
by
I
that.
think, again, a lovely, beautiful soul. And it comes out in your work. It really does.
Yeah, just wanted to put that in there because it is sort of a soft, gentle style. It's very similar to Joe's in some ways.
It's lovely. And, I mean, he did send me an original. I've got it.
Yes. Well, you've got
Crow and Snail. I've got an original, yes.
Yes, multiple.
I've got a few. And yeah, he just sent it to me because I love his work so much. So he is, a really genuine person, and both deserve a follow on Twitter.
Right, now for something completely different. Marneus Calgar by Keiron, Gillen and Jacen Burrows is the first in the line of 40k Warhammer comics. Now, we don't usually talk about split issues, usually only look at full,
nope.
but I just wanted to talk about this one because I'm a complete 40k nerd, as you may already know.
No.
No.
Really?
Yes.
Gosh, where was I yesterday? What were you doing? Playing Warhammer.
So Marneus Calgar is a legendary chapter master of the Ultramarines, leads his elite space marines against humanity's greatest threats. And it's basically issue 1 is the story of how he became to be where he is. The stories of how space marines become is brutal, and it's a horrid life. And generally they're sent into the wilderness of whichever planet they're brought up on. And that trains them with different skills because of the different planets, threats, to then be able to go out and lead, if they survive, to then go out and fight and lead and kill.
Like Master Chief. Halo.
But he wasn't sent to a planet. Well, these are before Halo, so you can't really say that. He was never sent to a planet to do that. He was brought up in a lab. These people are trained, as well as having a bit of things pumped into them. They are trained with pure hate and anger and, very different characters. The art, though, is what I want to talk about because it is gorgeous. Mm-hmm. Jacen's art just picks it right. There was a concern when the cover came out that it was a bit too bright.
Right.
For us Warhammer players because we're just living such a dark universe.
I just thought you're just all in a dark basement somewhere.
But it does work. It works within the comic, and it is bright, but there's dark areas. It just works, and the visceral death of bolt guns ploughing into. Yeah, it is gorgeous. So, if you're interested in Warhammer at all, it's probably either wait for the collection or go and grab it.
Right.
But I think it could well be a really good story in the end. So yeah. I just like to give that a quick mention.
You may.
Okay.
Okay.
Can we just also mention a film we watched last night?
Oh.
Nothing to do with comics, but
no, because it was Halloween.
Yeah. So you had to pick a horror movie.
I picked a horror movie, but I think I picked something more.
It wasn't really a horror movie.
I was hiding behind my pillow.
It's certainly not what you thought it was.
No, and that was good in a way because it was even more deep and meaningful.
So it's called My House.
His house.
His house.
Don't worry about it.
Is it not My House?
No.
I'm going to have to find that now. I'm sure it was. Anyway. We'll go by what you called it.
I loved it so much. I got the name right.
Okay, it's called His House.
Really?
Written and directed by Remy Weeks, from a story by Felicity Evans and Toby Venables. Mm-hmm. Stars Wumi Mosaku, Soap Dirisu, I apologise, and Matt Smith. That's the easy one. Yeah. So it follows a refugee couple.
Yeah.
Who from South Sudan who've come across on a boat.
Yeah.
Lost the child whilst crossing over. And it's initially just them learning to live within Britain.
It starts off at the detention centre and then they're given a house. They've passed that part of the thing. And, given a house.
A good-sized house, as they kept saying.
They kept saying it's a good-sized house. I mean, it was a dump. But
it was.
They kept saying, a good-sized house, you'll be fine here. And it follows them initially, doesn't it? Just trying to fit in.
To fit in, almost, which is what you think the film's going to be.
Good people. That was said quite often, wasn't it? We're good people.
And there was never... Yeah, which does actually link to the story. But there was never... I was expecting, here we go. It's going to be all just purely about racism, but it wasn't. It was so much more than that. In fact, that was very little. There was none, virtually. It was more about...
the only part of the racism part, then, if you're going to think about it, is the fact that they were put in a community who'd obviously seen people come and go. They were quite toughened community. They weren't overly racist, apart from...
There was one incident.
That bit, isn't it, with the three lads... Where
which was very clever.
It was clever because it's three black lads being racist to the lady. And he's like, that is clever because...
It's not about colour, it's about where you're from.
Yeah. So that was interesting, that part. But yes, it's...
And it follows their story, and obviously there's something going on in the background. They're plagued by a ghost of some type.
Yeah.
And it's a story of what's plaguing them, why they're plagued by this ghost. Yeah. And
Are they plagued by a ghost?
Well, we don't. This is the other thing. But you kind of the backstory that they put in.
We can't give too much
through it. No, but obviously they give you a backstory as to to why they're in this country.
Yes, yeah.
Really does make you think, because it was only just the other week where a load of children had died.
Yeah.
And stuff, and you can sit there in our nice houses and think, I don't want anyone in our country. But when you see stuff like that, which does happen, and this story that happens, bar all the horror bits, could be real. Probably is based on a mix of the whole bit. I mean, know, I can't say without spoiling it.
No, exactly. You've got to be careful.
And it makes you think a lot. Yeah. It really does.
It was a very clever film,
and it makes you want to try and do something, but there's not much you can do, and it's horrible.
Yeah, but also it's the mental baggage that they brought with them, isn't it, as well? And
even without
what
the story,
happened on the way as to
what's made you want to leave your home and your whole culture.
Yeah, because they had good jobs. I mean, she was a teacher,
Oh, yeah.
he was in banking, you know. And
They were happy in their lives.
Yeah, and yet we come here and they're almost treated like as, well, you're just a hanger on. You're not
But he
a
was
person.
proud to, because he wanted to be safe, he wanted
to
life.
be safe, and
he's willing to change his whole culture to
fit in.
Yeah. Which is wrong, that we kind of, and we do expect it, but it's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a very clever... I'd urge you all to watch it. If you like me, a little bit jumpy, definitely with a cushion.
There's probably, I'm looking at the reviews, 5.8 out of 10. I've got a feeling a lot of people are reviewing this based on a trailer thinking, oh, it'll be your typical horror movie.
Oh, yes, which it isn't.
It's not.
No, it's much more than that.
No.
It was very good.
So if you want a thought-provoking
and it's
horror
only an
film,
hour and a half long, which is
it.
what all films should be, as I was saying yesterday. Bring back the hour and a half films.
There. It's just not... Lord of the Rings is never going to be an hour and a half.
We don't need
But I agree,
films
some films are too long.
Yes,
I agree.
most films too long.
A lot of it is down to just not bad editing. They just can't seem to edit it right.
Yeah, so maybe they should just stick with a simple premise and then build layers on that instead of trying to fit everything with bells and whistles on.
Anyway, that's Nikki's movie making podcast.
I'm sure they're all listening.
Right, let's have a bit of Tom, and then we'll come back and talk a bit about football.
Mm-hmm. It's his comics that smell, not him. Prepare for all the small press goodness that he can squeeze into 5 minutes. Your host, Tom Scratch and Sniff Stewart.
Thanks, Nikki. No, I don't smell. It's good of you to say. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Small Pressed with Tom Stewart at That Comic Smell on Twitter. How are we all doing? You'll have to excuse all the background noise that's going on. I am recording this whilst walking dogs. Right, so Nikki and Ian have done new intros, and it now says that I have a 5-minute slot. I know they would give me more than that, but let's try and do it. Let's try and do 5 minutes. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about Holly by Steven Ingram, about Holly on the island of Gleeg trying to get off and make a new start for herself someplace else. She's feeling very isolated and, very out of place, like she doesn't belong, and just in life in general. And, it's a very sort of coming of age story that I think all of us can kind of relate to in one way or another. Holly's on this island, and she really needs to get out. She's got a friend who's a farmer. She's got her mum, but she doesn't really have much else. She's in her last week of school. She's got exams and whatnot, and she kind of needs to study and get out of school. And you know what? It's something that I think a lot of us can definitely relate to. It's something that I have actually been in a situation very much like Holly's, except I wasn't what looks to be a heavy smoker by the book. But I think Stephen has really tapped into... I don't know if this is experience he said himself, but he's very much tapped into that sort of adolescent, just a way to leave high school nature. He's remembered that memory, and he's honed it completely. It's an absolutely perfect tale. There's a lot going on. There's a sort of thread of a single parent household going in there. In a way, her dad's always away on business and away working. There isn't really much going for her. Mum's trying to get her to get a job and stuff, and she's just... It's very sort of mundane in a way that it is just about sort of real life. But put through this prism of there's got to be something more than this. It's really sort of... Holly's trying to find adventure, and she's trying to get just a bit more out of life. And at that age, you really are, but she's gunning for it. She's really gunning for it and telling everybody, I'm not going to be here forever. I'm going to go. She's got some pals, like she's got some sort of older gentlemen as friends. But it kind of, it reeks of that kind of Scottish small town sense that you are stuck. You can't find a way out, and you really need an escape. You need to see more of the world. You're seeing more of the world on television and books and everything, but you can't see it for yourself. You know, you're stuck in this kind of working class background, and you can't really see any way out, especially when you're younger as well. You don't have the foresight to see that as you get older things will change. You know, Holly's been slowly but surely building up money here and there. She's actually got the foresight to kind of almost get out there and explore. It really smacked of the film Sing Street for me. I absolutely love that film. It's an Irish, sort of very religious school, and they're trying to start up a band in this time when it's kind of hammered in that you're not going to do any better than going into a trade or something like that. You know, it very much smacked of that, but he's given something that all of us can kind of tap into and relate to, and the way that Steven has written and drawn it and everything as well, it's all so accessible. There's no hyper stylized details or, you know, intricacy in the writing or anything. It's very straightforward. I love it. It's such a palate cleanser. There's so many people trying new things, which is absolutely fantastic, and it's amazing that people are trying new things and trying new art and everything and trying to push the boundaries, but sometimes you need something just to be like, this is storytelling. Like, comics are storytelling, and this is what this is at the basis of it. This is a story from start to finish. It's just, I loved it, absolutely loved it. Steven's got an absolutely incredible style as it is anyway, just really nice and very solid, lovely lines. There's a kind of delicate nature to it as well, in a way. Some of the lines are quite softer, but each character is very fleshed out and stuff. And in the storytelling, there's very good relationships. He builds up the relationships really well within it. It's a very well accomplished, well written, well drawn story. You would do well to get it, and it's a solid big tome as well. I wasn't expecting it to be so thick. I know he'd done it on Kickstarter, and you know, it said how many pages and stuff, but see, when it comes through, you're like, wow, this really is fleshed out, and he knocked it out really quite quick as well, with an accompanying comic to go along with it. So yeah, check it out, Steven Ingram Holly. I think you can find Steven online, steveningram.art. Steven with a V. Ingram, Ingram. He's also on Twitter at Steven Ingram Art, and Instagram at Steven Ingram Art. He's also on Facebook as well. You can check out most of the comics and get to his shop and everything on there. He's on Etsy and Comixology and everything as well. Check him out, Steven Ingram Art. Quickly before I go, I'm just going to say that there are loads of comic Kickstarters just now, like tons. You know, throw a rock and you'll hit one. Get out there. A couple to highlight just quickly would be Good Comics are quite close to making their target. They're asking for a wee bit more, but it's because they're giving a lot more. You know, they're giving a whole slate of comics for the 2021 year. Get on that. Dan Butcher has just put out Viper, a new comic coming from that started off in the pages of the Awesome Comics podcast comic anthology. Gabby Scanlon has Stonewood Mountains, Volume 1, Lost in the Woods, up at the minute. You can check that out. There's quite a bit off his target, so, you know, give it a boost, give it a back. Oh, it's getting windy. Sorry if there's lots of wind in this. I need to mention that the Awesome Comics pod guys are always doing a drink and draw near enough every Friday. It's Tom Curry that hosts it, so check that out. And that is it from Small Press this time. Hopefully I've hit my 5 minutes. We'll see if I've done it or not. I might come in just over. If so, I'm going to hit that 5 minute mark on a review point. Okay, thanks for listening, folks, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now. To get in touch, please go to Twitter and Instagram at ThatComicSmell. Thanks for listening.
Keep clicking, dear. Keep clicking everything. I'm
Right.
sure you'll find the bit you need.
Oh, here. Thought Bubble 2020.
2020.
Going on
Is
the
that how we do it?
14th and the 15th of November. Well, it's Northern in it as well.
Yeah, it's
Other
Northern.
side of the country.
Other side.
Well, it is actual Yorkshire. There you go.
Oh,
it all
I
fits.
can do my Yorkshire accent.
Right, first bit. Before the before the event starts on the 13th at 7:30, the Awesome Comic Podcast is doing a drink and draw again.
Yes, we should do this.
Well, we can do. No matter what your skill level is, all you have to do is turn up, be nice, be respectful, and have fun drawing with a group of awesome comic-loving folks to celebrate Thought Bubble kicking off. Plus, everyone posts a work on blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, get involved if you're interested. You don't have to be a creator.
Oh, God, no, anyone.
Just anybody. Even I could do it.
Yes.
So for more details, contact Scum Curry or the Awesome Comic Podcasts if you want further details on how to get involved with that. So that's a kicking off, which I think's awesome.
Yeah,
literally.
I like that.
That was on brand, that was.
Oh, look at you.
Look at that.
Oh, they'll be inviting us back on at this rate.
Tell you what, I want my fee for that. Awesome, boys.
Like, no.
So, some of the big names getting involved with Thought Bubble. Charlie Adlard.
Don't know him.
No, don't know him. Hannah Berry, Doug Braithwaite.
No, none of these people.
You don't know any of them, do you not? No. Kelly Sue DeConnick, Michael Conrad, Becky Cloonan, Duncan Fregado. I can't speak.
You can't.
Dave Gibbons, Keiron Gillen. Obviously, we talked about his comic just then.
Yeah.
Jeff Lemire.
Oh.
If there's one person, it's Jeff Lemire.
Yeah. So Jeff. Breathe through it, breathe.
Luke Pearson. Obviously, Hilda. And then we get to something completely different. Kevin Smith.
I know. You're going to drop in on that one, aren't you?
I'm intrigued. Obviously, he's well-known. Well, he's written comics in the past. Obviously, well-known as well, just being a massive nerd. So, yeah. So they've got an interesting lineup. That's only the start of it. It keeps going.
Yes.
Sean Phillips is always there.
He'll turn up to the opening of an envelope, really.
But yeah, it's a really good lineup of names. And I'm really intrigued to see how they put these together.
How they go about it. It's good to see how.
Because there is nobody copying. This is not stuff that they've looked at the lakes and copied, and vice versa. This is all them thinking.
Yeah, exactly. And
how
that's
they can create it.
You need to be.
Well, there's always going to be crossovers.
But yeah, exactly. Because we can learn from them, they can learn from us. It's how it all should be, really, isn't it?
But this time there is none. It's all an original thing, so that's really interesting. It feels, from what I gather, it's mainly going to be sort of panels, like you would see, of people chatting, interviewing each other. So you got them discussing Black Panther.
Lovely.
They got Duncan Jones and Alex DeCampi. Duncan Jones, brilliant filmmaker. So yeah, that's again a bit different, a bit more open. What else we got? Let's go. You got Chip.
You've got
Darsky.
Hannah Berry being a pub landlord. I think that's something that you need to go and do.
That sounds interesting. I could see her working behind a bar.
I could as
very
well. She's
easily.
Very good at it.
Yeah,
she
would load of
mix
names.
Those cocktails up as well.
Load of names there. She'll go from Charlie, Sean, Duncan, John McRae, Lee Garbutt, Emma Viacelli, Rachel Stott, Doug Braithwaite, Cy Spurrier, and Abs J Harding. So that'll be interesting. Oh, watch our socials for access to tickets to the Zoom call.
Ooh.
Oh, so it's limited. Limited. In conversation with Kevin Smith's on there. Publishing a graphic novel, Kate graphic novel panel. So there's loads. And it's the type of stuff you would expect to see at the event itself. So script writing, absolutely loads. So go and check out the website, Thought Bubble. I just wanted to give it a quick shout out, just because I think, why not? We should all support each other. And help each other out.
Yeah.
Get involved at the weekend. I think it's so important for these festivals that people are getting involved.
Yeah.
You know, show you getting involved online and really promote each other and promote the work that's going on. So, yeah, that was all I was wanted a quick shout out.
Lovely.
About it. But, if we can, we'll get involved with the awesome comics draw. If we can. Why are you laughing at?
I think everyone should see your creations.
My creations are amazing.
They are amazing. That's the word I was going to use.
They're wondrous.
They are wondrous. That is definitely a word I'd use.
Thank you. Great, me. Right, let's Tom and Mike take control of the podcast.
Should they really?
See you in a few hours.
Expect hours of comic ramblings. They've only gone and got together again. Your hosts for the Mutterdowns are Mike, the Dungeon Master Williams, and Pete, how do, Taylor.
How do? Welcome to Mutterdowns, the yakking endlessly about comics section of the podcast. I'm Pete Taylor, current Leica Comics Clever Clogs and the chronicler of Silverbeard. Online I trade as This Man, This Pete, and as always the mutterings will be supplied by...
Mike Williams, fanboy of all things comics and avid RPGer. I can be found on Twitter as @CthulhuPunk.
We are joined tonight by fellow Scroll-Lord, friend of the podcast, indeed roving comics reporter for this section of the podcast. Ian and Nikki don't have a roving comics reporter. It's the man who doesn't believe you can have too many Kickstarter campaigns, the maestro himself, Gustavo Vargas.
Hey, you're right.
How you doing, mate?
I'm good, thank you.
So, you're way up north of the borders. So,
Yes.
We do tend to start with what is rapidly becoming the support section of the podcast, which is Isolation Diaries, where me and Mike have a bit of a moan about the current tribulations of lockdown. So, how's it affecting you?
Myself, I'm good. That's myself. Because I stay in a room and I draw. So even if people were having parties outside, I couldn't go out. But in general, family and even my wife, she cannot work right now. So that's not easy. She's German. And usually every year we go to Germany. Not 100% sure if we're going to spend Christmas there. And even if we go there, we're not completely sure how easy it's going to come back. So it's everything gets complicated for things that should be very, simple and just planning. You cannot plan. Things are a bit locked down. So generally it's okay, but it's kind of annoying.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, day to day, there's not a lot, but then the things that you would normally just take for granted of walking out and doing, you just, that's not on the cards. How's it going with you, mate?
I'm going to try and be a bit more positive on this one. I'm isolating. I always have to anyway. And it's been red alert on stress levels for the last couple of weeks with work. And it's one of those strange situations where it's stressful, but you kind of feel a bit proud at what you're achieving. So it's kind of a mixed bag, that. But it's all about next week for me. Big mental health boost. I've got my sister and brother-in-law coming up.
Nice.
They've been isolating for 3 weeks themselves so that they're able to visit us. And we've been doing the same. So we're going to have at least 3 or 4 days of solid Dungeons and Dragons, of which I have got a phenomenal game lined up. We've had this campaign going for about 2 years, and the huge mass battle that's about to occur will be the halfway point.
Oh, that's great.
So lots of board games, and it's a chance for comic swaps as well. My sister is an avid collector all the way through us growing up together as well, and the last thing she dumped on me was this huge box. Every time we move house, we find that we put boxes aside and things go in the loft or from parents' house, and but it was about several hundred 1990 to 1992 2000 ADs of mine, and during the same period she bought the monthlies and the American quality comics as well, reprints, and a load of other random stuff. There's some amazing Christmas and holiday 2000 AD specials in there. So I'm having a final read of those, and then they're going to go back to her to read, and I'm going to put what I want to nick from her in an email shortly. So we kind of just do a massive comic book collection swap. And obviously my partner Alison has the collections now, and her husband Paul has lots of comic collections as well. So it's kind of just a big comic swap meet as well, which is quite cool. Unfortunately, we were going to bring my mother up, but she's North Wales, and that's not going to happen now.
Yeah.
So that's the big bummer about it all, with just a complete lockdown. And other than that, we recently discovered that Star Trek Discovery is awesome.
And have you just started watching it?
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I haven't started season 3 yet. It was Sock, I think, that first mentioned it to me, and I'm not a big Star Trek fan, but I really enjoyed the first 2 seasons, so I'm looking forward to jumping in on the third, I have to say.
Same here. Not a massive Trekkie. My sister is, and she loved it and kept telling me to watch it. So every time I see so-called Trekkies trash it and say it's not really Star Trek and all, I just say no, because every single Star Trek fan I know absolutely loves it. I've got another friend, Lynn, up in Glasgow, and she's just potty about it.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
All I need to know.
Well,
so how's it been going with you?
For me, I used to say in my bios that I was a graphic designer by day, comic creator by night, and then lockdown happened, and for periods I was comic creator all the time, and that was absolutely great. But I got a real work crunch recently, and it's a bit like you were. Just certain times as a freelancer, you just have to do it, and I've been slogging through what I call work during the day, and then try and grab as much time at the beginning and the end of the day to finish my scrolls strip. So it just means you're knackered most of the time. But I've just finished my inks and started my colours, and it's all lettered. So we are literally, days away from completion, which after the last Scroll Summit that we had, where we were going through what pages need to be filled. So it's great. I feel rewarded that I've got the work. I have lots of conversations with people who obviously aren't as lucky as me. So when it does come in, I just have to plow through it, and you just have to put your head down. And I don't want to complain about it, but equally, when there is a project that calls, and you just want to spend as much time to finish it, it's a bit frustrating. But just plugging away, and then we've got our own little because we aren't able to go and see the girls. We've got our own little communications centre with a permanent sort of Skype laptop set up, and so we end up with the odd phone call to the girls, because that's it. We're not visiting anyone. So yeah, it's good. So it's enjoyable, but it's at the moment I'm just in one of those periods of intense hard work. So it's all right. It's all right.
A friend used to tell me you cannot complain when you have a lot of work, which is good. This is good. Yeah.
Totally. I mean, it's much needed, and it's not all of it is particularly nice. There's a couple of nice design jobs in there, and there's a couple of just head down sort of production task jobs, really. But I've never. You can never turn down work, even when there's that little voice in your head saying, "Are you sure?" You've got 3 jobs on and a comic. It's you should say you can't do this one. So I have managed to push some back as far as I can. But it's all right. I can't complain. Now let's get on to more important matters, and your Kickstarter, mate, Gustavo. I mean, it's absolutely going great guns, isn't it? I think we have still got a few days left for listeners to jump on board.
Yeah, we still have 7 days to go. It's the last week basically, but it's going. I wasn't expecting that many people really jumping into the. And it's been going very steady. It's been very, very long because I miscalculated and I just launched. I didn't know that was a choice. I just clicked. I thought I was like accepting. Yeah, okay, and but it's going amazingly well. I'm overwhelmed. I'm happy. I smile even more than usual, which is a lot.
Yes, that's true. But I mean, it is. It's just gone. It went great guns from the beginning, isn't it? I have got a note that it was a bit of a surprise when it started, literally, because I mean, you had planned on a slightly different sort of start time and a slightly different length, but those Kickstarter dashboard just got the better of you.
Yeah, it was almost 15 days difference.
Right.
Very, very long. The thing is, they approved it, and I thought I was just accepting the approval, and I was actually launching. I did it too quick. I just pressed buttons, and all of a sudden, I think Fraser Campbell was the first one buying it, and I was like, I didn't know you could buy even before you launch. That's amazing. And then Russell, and I was like, wait, and I called my wife, and I told her, I think it's live. I don't know what's happening. And she told me, call Russell and ask him. And I called him, hey dude, you back it, right? Yeah. So is it live? Yeah. Didn't you launch? I didn't know I launched. Okay. So I just told my wife, bring me a beer and let's dive in. That's it. But it was amazing. It was a very intense day.
It's quite a package, though, isn't it? I mean, so for the mindless ones out there, you've just launched the Kickstarter is under the umbrella of PUNO, but it's actually all 4 of your current Peruvian cyberpunk comics.
Yes. The thing is, I did Manu. First I did Trujillo, which is a one-shot comic. Then came Lima, which is another one-shot comic, but they happen in the same world, in the same universe. Then I did Manu, which was the first issue of a 3-issue story. PUNO is the second issue of this 3-issue story. So I'm offering everything. And I think most people are going for the whole cyberpunk pack. They're very curious, and they know it. I explain on the Kickstarter that it's connected. It's even some characters that appear on Lima and on Trujillo are also appearing on Manu and PUNO. So everything is connected. It's not like you have to read it, but it's a bit more fun because you're, okay, what happens next to this character? How much has he changed or whatever? And yeah, people is very, very curious about it. I'm incredibly happy about it.
I mean, it is. It's a box set essentially, isn't it? I mean, I think that's great, you know, because it can be frustrating when you do have to wait, and the fact that you can offer, like you say, this connected adventure for four volumes all in one go is fantastic.
Yeah.
So, have you cornered the market in Peruvian cyberpunk, or are there other purveyors out there?
I think I'm the first one. I don't know any other one. I know they're doing a bit more of good Peruvian science fiction right now, but nobody making actually Peruvian cyberpunk. In Peru, I think I sing a bit more of more like Peruvian superheroes and some other kind of science fiction. So I might be the first one. Maybe I don't know for sure, but I might, because even Peruvian people that are living in Peru and other that are living in other places are like, oh my God, I never heard of this. So
right,
yeah, no, that's amazing, and it came naturally. It was, I never planned to make, okay, let's make a cyberpunk story. I just wanted to make a story happening in some place in Peru. I very fast went to make a science fiction that was very cyberpunky, and little by little things became more, basically into the cyberpunk genre, cyberpunk, biopunk, a bit dystopian, and it started growing and growing. I wasn't really planning that much; it just came organically.
It's interesting because I do remember chatting to you before, and we will be doing a little bit of genre World Cup later on, which obviously touches on the sci-fi nature. But I remember talking to you and you telling me that it was the country itself that was the starting point that you just mentioned, and you chose, was it city, jungle, and highlands? Is it?
No, highlands. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you've taken those three main areas. So it really is a case of starting with the geography of the place and the setting, and then putting on a genre later.
Yeah, exactly. It has to do completely with that. Even the names, Trujillo, it's a city. So it all happens in this city, particular city that's on the coast. Lima is the main capital, so everything happens in Lima. Manu is not a city, but it's a national park, a national reserve on the jungle. But most of the story happens there. Now, most of the PUNO story is going to happen in PUNO, which is another part of Peru. So I'm exploring particular areas and see what happens there. So I explore how different they are and what I can take advantage in, how I can structure a story from there. Because basically we have coast, highlands, and jungle. It's very different how all those connect.
So what do you remember when if you start with the geography and the setting, do you remember how the story turned and became the genre that it was? I mean, was it character designs? Was it, sort of just story beats?
I think the whole story just came to me. I was trying to think really hard, and nothing was coming because many times you think very hard, and eventually your brain decides to click bits and gives you information. So I wasn't exactly sure what to do. I was just trying to find a story, and I remember I was still living in Peru. I was on a bus, and it came like a river, like here, take it. And I was like, oh my God, just trying to remember all the bits. It didn't have all the details. It wasn't that much cyborg. It didn't have that many animals, but the main plot was kind of getting done. And then I started exploring a bit more what I could take advantage of the places and how I could, change bits or move them to, what I could make with them. And that's when it became more cyborg and went a bit more cyberpunk. It was a bit more just crime.
Right.
Science fiction, dystopian crime. But little by little, basically because of research, the animals. So I said, okay, you can put something on a box, but if you put it inside a guinea pig, that's a bit cooler. So little by little, it went into that direction. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. So the actual the Kickstarter, it's done well. I mean, maybe we should give people an idea on what the general thrust of your story. So it's a cyberpunk adventure, but it's revolving around criminal cartels
It's basically crime life. It's this dystopian world mixed with crime and pre-Columbian science fiction link characters, and everything is this war related. So you might find the same characters. One character that appears on Trujillo will appear on this next saga, Manu and PUNO, and a couple of characters appearing on Lima will appear on the others. These first two are one shots, but it's this umbrella of things that are happening all together.
Brilliant. So, I mean, you've had quite a few pro backers as well, haven't you? You've had some big names publicly tweeting that they bought the back the campaign.
Yeah, that was very overwhelming. I was like, what?
Yeah.
What? I don't know. I have no idea because I've had some communication with a couple of very good pros. For example, even David Rubin, we met in the Lakes, right? And we already were chatting a bit. But Brian Michael Bendis. I don't know how he appeared. I was like, I don't know. From the Shelley Bond, it's I don't know. It's been a roller coaster. I don't know how, but I feel very grateful because at least I think I'm not doing. There must be a couple of things that I'm not doing that wrong. So at least looks interesting. So.
Well, totally. I mean, I was going to ask because, this is your first Kickstarter. So, obviously you've got some friends who've had experience. Pardon me. So you've got, but was it what you expected? I mean, what have you learnt? Really, I suppose is what you thought going in, and then what you found out since you actually pressed that button.
I had an idea, especially in the beginning when we did the scroll campaign, because I really didn't understand it that well. I just started, so I saw a lot what was happening behind. And I was like, okay, so this is how it works, and you really try to keep it moving, to keep it fresh, to bring new things, and to communicate with backers, and it's a whole creature, and you're basically a bit like, even though you're making comics, the comic is not the main thing. You become something like the publisher, so you have to do all those bits you never wanted to do. So, and you prepare and launch. So, a bit, I had an idea, but I didn't know it was going to reach so many people that didn't know my work. And basically this communication with new things, and it's been bouncing to many places. For example, in Peru, I've been putting more often than not, I put things on my face and all that. But basically, because I publish here, everything is in English. Only the digital versions are in Spanish. And even a newspaper approached me from Peru to make me a note and everything. So it really, I don't know. It really got very, very spread to many places that I had no idea exactly how, but yeah, it has a very long reach. That was amazing. Gives you a lot of can improve really the potential you could have with your products.
So yeah, it is. It's quite a surprise, isn't it? And I mean, I enjoyed it when I did it for Kickstarter. But if anybody asked me the same question, I don't think I know what I learned or what I did right. It was a bit of a whirlwind, and I think it's when you're in it, you're right just to smile and enjoy it, really, aren't you? That's all you can do. Is just It's a particular creature. You're just they're moving beats, but it's like, I don't know, when you see these musicians with these big boards and they push buttons when they're taking the music. So you never know if they're really faking it or if they really know what they're doing. So yeah, something like that. You do things, but you have no idea if that really did something or not. So you just try to be there. Yeah. Well, that is such a good analogy. But yeah, so there's lots of people at home going, God, this guy's a genius. Exactly. The Wizard of Oz, you behind the curtain, you're just pushing all the Kickstarter buttons. Superb. Well, we better make sure that people know. So if you search for PUNO, a Peruvian cyberpunk comic on Kickstarter, that's where to jump on board. Like we say, it's the last few days, and go and check out the big, gorgeous comic box set that you can pick up there. Now, unfortunately, you do have to help us out as well, because the Genre World Cup, yes, it's still going on, is in need of your sci-fi brain, because the competition stands at the third quarterfinal, which, appropriate enough for you as a guest, is sci-fi versus fantasy. So, Mike, how did we get to where we are?
Okay, so this is the third of our quarterfinals. The first quarterfinal was crime versus romance, and we had just about a winner of crime. And crime will meet horror versus post-apocalypse in the semi-final. And I'm afraid we don't have a conclusive poll at the moment on horror versus post-apocalypse. So when we complete today's episode of Fantasy versus Sci-Fi, we will be issuing a poll for both of these quarterfinals, and we'll put that on Twitter and anywhere else we can possibly fit it, and ask around friends, family, and anything else we can get a vote from, and that's how we're going to determine the next semi-finals. So today is Fantasy versus Sci-Fi.
Now, we were both sort of pleased that this came up. I mean, it's such a good genre clash, really, and it's kind of one of those genres that you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who didn't have a reference point for either of these genres. You know, whether it was outside comics, whether you're talking about movies or TV shows, these are two of the kind of core story ideas, aren't they? I mean, there's just so much, and funny enough, the fact that we've got you, Mike, who just mentioned your upcoming continuation of your D&D campaign, and we've got, you know, Peruvian cyberpunk maestro. I mean, it's just fundamental. It seems it's in the blood of most geeks, the kind of inbred knowledge of both of these genres.
It is, and they're huge genres, and the number of subgenres of each is staggering when you start really looking into them. And some of those subgenres are just indistinguishable whether they are true sci-fi or fantasy anyway.
Right.
I've thousands of examples like that. All the way since we started doing the podcast, I've drilled down into subgenres like cowboys in space subgenre. Was one that I surprisingly had a huge amount to say about that, more than I actually thought I would do. But it's, and I've ended up doing 2 sessions on cyberpunk now, of which you did have a mention, can I add? But I'm going to have to do yet another session on cyberpunk.
Guess who forgot to put his phone on silent again?
Oh, I thought there was sound effects you're adding there. And I'm staggered that we have a new subgenre of Peruvian cyberpunk. And I'm not kidding on that, because Google it now. First 2 or 3 pages of results,
Maestro
only comes up as PUNO. Yep.
Nice.
Hey, yeah, there you go. You've Googled
That's how you know you created a subgenre, and I've dropped it into so many conversations as well. Effortlessly, people just think it's always been there. So yeah, I think it's I think this is a really big head-to-head here on Fantasy versus Sci-Fi.
Well, I mean, you've already said, Gustavo, that for the books, the genre wasn't the driving force, but there was obviously something that that idea came through that fitted, you know, what you were doing. And we have talked previously that story for you is more important than genre, isn't it? It's, you know, you've got to think of the basics before you put the trappings or the settings on the top.
Yeah. So because if in my case, if not, I get too much on the surface and not so much really developing the story. And for example, I might have an idea about a story and characters, and I'm trying to make them cyberpunk, and then I realize actually this is going to work better on fantasy. So I just put some, I don't know, whatever, troubles or magic or that. So, yeah.
Have you worked in both? Have you done fantasy stories?
Not that. I used to do more fantasy when I was a kid. I used to do a lot of Master of the Universe stories.
Right.
Drawing my notebooks. And I don't have them anymore. I'm very sad, but I don't know. I don't even remember throwing them out. But I don't have them anymore. And the one I did for Scroll is a bit kind of grasps a bit into fantasy, I think.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
Masters of the Universe, that's an
like,
interesting mashup. Masters of the Universe is one of those that's an interesting, really is one of those that it you would say fantasy, but there are so many elements in there that have got, that sci-fi.
It's swords and sorcery and laser guns, isn't it?
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, totally. I mean, I find it, the more you start to think about how similar they are, that Thor is kind of both. That you've got, especially the movies moved it that bit further forward to the extent that you never really had spaceships so much in the comic, but you've got them in the MCU movies. Mm-hmm. And that drives it much further to being Asgardians are aliens rather than gods, so you take that sort of you take that turning with the story. So once you start going down that road about how similar the two genres are, it can be a very thin dividing line between the two. I mean, does that make it harder or easier for us to decide what's the better genre? Is there a creative reason that one works over another? I mean, I'll put one forward, and I know this is something I've mentioned with Gustavo before, is I'm not a big fan of drawing technology.
You've mentioned that so many times.
I'm really, really not a big fan. I mean, that's part of the reason why I properly swayed into the fantasy genre, because you get to make up your own world. I mean, you do in both. You get to declare that this is a completely sort of a world that only you can draw if you're that way inclined, or you can change your world to be something that more suits it. But I mean, creatively, I think there can be a reason why people choose it. And I know I did choose fantasy because I wanted to draw, monsters and I suppose temples rather than, robots and skyscrapers. Do you think there's any other reasons creatively that you might go for one over the other?
I might be wrong because it depends. They're still so broad that I don't know that much. I definitely know a bit more about science fiction, but I feel science fiction can be. It's not that it always is, but can be a bit more about politics, how you interpret what's happening right now. Like,
yeah.
I don't know, even books like The Handmaid's Tale or anything like that. Even my stories are very linked to what's happening now or how it works and what I think it would happen in the next 20, 50, 200 years. But it's not that far off. If it was like 1,000 years and everybody now is green, yeah, that's a bit more different. While fantasy, I feel, is a bit more free, as to, in a way, a bit more playful, to just explore whatever you can think of. I feel that a bit in a way.
That's a really interesting way of looking at it, actually, because when you first started talking about politics, I immediately thought of Game of Thrones, because that's, even though it's a fantasy, it's still very much, sort of politically sort of led. You get a very clear idea of what the players on the game board want and how they're going to get it. But then when you started, you're absolutely right in terms of science fiction being forward looking. Mm-hmm. It's, even if it's sort of dystopian or not, it can be aspirational, but it generally is talking about moving forward, isn't it? And creating something perhaps new, that technology represents a striving forward. as opposed to, I suppose, when you think of it in that way, fantasy can be not backwards, but it seems to be, it calls the past to mind in the same way that science fiction calls the future.
Yeah.
You feel stuck in the middle at the moment, I suppose. You feel hopeful for science fiction to perhaps bring about some remedies, for instance, whereas fantasy can represent, somewhere that you've been, or perhaps hardships of being without, maybe.
Even your fears, because I'm pretty sure there are stories not that different from what's happening right now, which is science. It's a very simple science fiction story.
Yeah.
But it happened as a global pandemic.
There's.
Last night we watched Doomsday. That's about a pandemic that hits Britain, and they build a huge wall across Hadrian's Wall to isolate the entire of Scotland. It's basically Escape from New York. It's a Neil Marshall film from about 10 years ago.
Right.
And it's stupid film, by the way, but fun. It's
right.
in a sort of like a grindhouse kind of way. But I've watched it so many times, and it's only last night did I sit down and think, oh, this is about a pandemic. Oh.
Yeah.
And it still felt like it was happier times.
Yeah, I suppose, even in a fantasy where you're looking for a cure and it comes through magic, that is essentially putting your hopes into something being pulled out of the human sort of story that represents forward motion. Maybe I think that is the fundamentals. What
the
direction?
Majority of sci-fi does have to have a grounding in today. Even if you fast forward, if you think of something as epic as Dune, it's only when you get something that epic when you're going 10,000 years into the future, and then another 12,000, and it's only then can you really escape any grounding in today's reality. But the vast majority really is. And comics and films as well, I've spotted lately, seem to be bringing science fiction a bit closer to now.
Right.
So it's more hard sci-fi. I think you tweeted about you watched the film Prospect, didn't you, not long ago? That's the one where it's kind of frontier sci-fi. Man's only just gone into space kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that seems to be like a bit of a resurgence in those kind of things with comic books that I've read recently. It's only a step or two into the future sort of thing. And I don't know if that's a sign of the times.
I've read a few articles recently about where we are now and how it reflects Judge Dredd and 2000 AD. I think there's quite a few articles that are linking certainly police action in sort of current America and its depiction in 2000 AD and Judge Dredd. There's a few parallels, and then consumerism and some of the trends that have come through both, and they still seem quite sort of close to home, really. Considering how long 2000 AD has been going, still seems completely relevant.
I think there was a quote from John Wagner that Judge Dredd, he was speaking about America of today, and there was a comment about Judge Dredd was supposed to be a warning, not a template.
Right.
And it'll certainly feel like that at the moment.
Totally.
They didn't get it.
So, okay. So, I mean, I did mention it to both of you as well, that I read or reread rather Twilight by Howard Chaykin, drinking game, Howard Chaykin and Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, which was a 3-issue prestige book that came out in 1990, 91, something like that. And I always remembered it as being gorgeous. I didn't remember a lot about the story. I just assumed it was sci-fi, but I'd recently come across it in some sort of a deep dive through my boxes, and I reread it recently. And even though it's got some of DC's old characters in there, like Tommy Tomorrow and I think Manhunter 2070, it's a story that could really be told in both genres. It's a very it seems to go right down the middle, even though it's got spaceships. It's got gods in there, which is an unusual one, I think, for sci-fi to necessarily include. It's got vampires, it's got robots, but there's not a lot before, if you turn a robot into a golem, and you turn a spaceship into a sort of galleon, you turn space into another land. It's a strange old thing. I find that the two, can they be completely interchangeable? Can you turn any sci-fi story into a fantasy, or any fantasy into a sci-fi? Or is there something inherent in each that has to be there?
I suppose there's some stories, there can be linked and you can interchange a bit. But for example, if I think something I know for sure, which is my stories, I don't see them fitting well on a fantasy ground.
Yeah, if you changed it to magic, something would feel wrong. Yeah,
because it doesn't relate that much to the actual Peru I'm talking about. And I don't know, there's a grittiness in particular that I don't think it will work that well. So I would have to change. I would have to go for another story. So sometimes not.
That's interesting. So as well as it being forward-looking, science fiction can perhaps be more linked to specific places or times of human experience, perhaps. I think when you set it in fantasy, it sometimes is a cloudiness that needs to be there, that you don't necessarily want it to be linked geographically. You want the freedom of it being something completely new, that maybe that with the very term being fantasy, it's not linked to sort of reality in the same way that science fiction has to be. Maybe that's one of the key differences between the two.
It feels a bit more like an allegory in fantasy, while fiction's it's trying to say a bit more like, careful there, because it's not that far in that way.
Yeah, there's something more recognizable, perhaps, or you expect something more recognizable in a science fiction tale than you would in a fantasy tale.
Put it very simple. You don't go to work on a spaceship, but you can imagine yourself in maybe 200 years going to work on a spaceship, while you don't imagine yourself riding a dragon. In 200 it's a bit harder to think. You think you pass through a port in order to do that.
Yeah, going to work on a dinosaur. Yeah. Yabba dabba doo. Yeah.
I think there is a discipline in the writing as well sometimes. With fantasy, I'm the first to admit that its magic is a great get-out clause. Whereas in sci-fi, you have to be a bit more logical in your reasoning as to why a computer system would fail or why something would interact in another way. And I do think some lazy fantasy, shall we say, does do its magic trick quite a lot. I don't think sci-fi writers have the get-out clause as much.
I was listening to a podcast the other day where they mentioned there was some sort of revolt in it. Is it the Hugo Awards, where there was some very hard line science fiction fans that took a stand against a more kind of laid back science fiction. As far as they were concerned, they wanted their science fiction cold, hard, and based on sort of facts. If you were going to put something in there, it needed to be totally worked out, and it had to be, at least extractable from current thinking or
yes,
like I said, fact based.
Yes.
And I think there is an element of, I suppose that's where a subgenre comes in, where there is a very hard line sometimes between even the different story choices you can make in a story, really, according to the genre you've chosen. Yeah. No.
How old is that story? When did that happen? A lot of years ago, or is that recent?
The Hugo Award thing?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it was... I took it to be quite recent, the way they were talking about it. Yeah, it was on a podcast with another science fiction writer who I'd not heard of. There's a new, I think it's called Neo. Is it Neo Text? Something like that. But it's another new publishing sort of tryout, really. They're releasing digital books initially, but with people like Jim Mafood, Andrew Vax, and Howard Shakin, of course. And yeah, they're released it, and they're doing articles. Funny enough, that's where the Judge Dredd articles were as well. So they've started with again quite a cross section, but science fiction, fantasy, and a crime novel. It's that sort of that's the way that they've worked it. So they obviously have a big interest in those genres, and I hadn't realised really that that there was this kind of attitude in fandom almost that unless I get it the way I want it, and I suppose it's like everything now, it's been mobilised. You can insist in some ways that the very works that you love, you kind of want to say in their production almost, or at least the awards they get. It's very strange. Just didn't think it would happen.
Oh,
yeah, I'll dig out the podcast. I'll send it over.
Yeah, right.
So, okay, if you have to make a choice, then, because we need, I think we normally make a choice ourselves and then put it out to the Great Unwashed to tell us what their favourite of the two genres would be. But if you had to choose between science fiction and fantasy, what would you choose?
So, like one book.
An arbitrary favourite, really. I think really more than anything. It's just if you had to lump. I suppose maybe you've been doomed on a desert island, and there's only one shop that sells. There's one island that sells just fantasy books, and there's one that sells just science fiction books.
It's a nice one.
What island do you want to be on?
My heart is definitely towards science fiction. I've always been more science fiction.
So that's just something you generally absorb more in terms of pop culture as well.
Yeah, I think so. Books and everything. Yeah, I've never read that much about fantasy, or in that case, not trying to go a bit deeper into. So since I was a kid, I was having fun with fantasy, but I was a bit more getting very curious and interested about understanding a bit more, and I don't know. I just explored a bit more science fantasy, and I was always, in that case, I always like ships and robots. That's something I really like a lot. And everything. Yeah.
Curiosity is another good keyword actually that I think fits very well with science fiction. I think you forward-looking, futuristic, but there's a curiosity that I think, as a driving force of a science fiction story, definitely has more of a science fiction vibe than. It's like everything you can. A fantasy quest can have some element of curiosity, but it seems more inbuilt to the genre of science fiction. Just the way it's built. There's a like you've just said, drive for curiosity. I think that's probably a really important element.
Yeah, like understanding a bit why these cogs are working in a way. It doesn't need to be that hard science fiction, but at least that kind of grounds logic around it and how everything connects.
Totally, and that's what fits with what you were saying as well, Mike, really, in terms of that curiosity, doesn't it? It's that it needs to fit somewhere and it needs to have some sort of sense to it to build from. Which island is Mike going to choose?
It's almost impossible for me to say one or the other, really, because I just, my entire geek life is sort of like a foot in both camps, really. Like I said, I'm playing D&D all next week, but I happen to be on a real sci-fi kick at the moment, particularly, funnily enough, cyberpunk, possibly because we've also got the cyberpunk role-playing game that I grew up with is soon to become the biggest selling computer game ever when they release Cyberpunk 2077, which is in December. So currently I'm just wading through anything I can cyberpunk. And I think that probably tips the scales just briefly for me at the moment. But ask me again in a month's time and I'll be Conan obsessed again. Or D&D comic obsessed in some way. So it's really difficult one for me. So it's only because you asked me today on a Wednesday.
It's true. I mean, they are both dear to my heart, but it's funny when you do start to consider how much of one you've consumed over another. It does make you realise that I have watched, read, and consumed a lot more sci-fi, I think, than I have fantasy. I don't know if that just means that I, make the choice. Do I choose that? I think I'm more confident that I will find a sci-fi that I enjoy that perhaps than a fantasy. And I think that sometimes is down to, again, the different choices and subgenres. At heart, I'm a sort of sword and sorcery, I think, fan over fantasy. I think, it all started pretty much because of Conan. And I don't think I've read much more. No, I've read Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser and some stuff. I think I read more fantasy when I was younger. I don't know the last time I read any fantasy recently. Comic wise, I am still a big fan of it, but do, I think, read more science fiction. So, I don't know. I think I'd probably have to go on the science fiction island because I just feel there would be more generally stuff that I would read that I enjoyed. I don't know.
I'm kind of surprised. I really think that there is equal output of both genres in comics.
Really?
I don't find
even in comics?
I don't find a shortage to read. Okay. I think, obviously, I did the whole Dungeons and Dragons and comics epic podcast, and I think the more you sort of delve into it, you have to push yourself, I think, a bit more. I think sci-fi is more advertised and out there, but when you look at Kickstarters,
true,
that's a difficult one, actually. There is a lot of fantasy stuff still coming out on Kickstarter, but again, this is where you get the genre merge of, is it more horror, or if you want to cut everything down to just the two genres and put them in one, I think there's a big output for both.
I'm not looking hard enough. That's what you're saying.
I'm currently chewing my way through all the first 3 volumes of Nemesis the Warlock, and that's that is sci-fi fantasy.
Yeah,
it's the Spanish Inquisition in space.
That's a good example. Yeah, it's a very good example.
You know, it's and another one. This is the perfect blend here. Mid 80s ish. There was a manga called 2001 Nights, and surprisingly enough, it is a direct combination of 2001, the book and the movie, and Arabian Nights.
Cool.
Really hard sci-fi, but with the Arabian Nights twist of how it tells the tales and stuff. And there was quite a few things I was thinking of when we were talking before about ones that really are deliberately written as a sci-fi fantasy. And it's very difficult to say. I think people tend to call it sci-fi as soon as they see a metal corridor or a gun. But I think there is lots of comics out there that were actually deliberately written to be both genres in the same time. And again, there is the Shadowrun series. They did do some comics, but it was mostly a role-playing game, which was a cyberpunk role-playing game, but with all the D&D character races and monsters. So it is D&D in space, basically, or cyberpunk D&D. And again, that's deliberately written. It's got to be in both genres. So I think there's quite a lot of choice out there. If you really don't want to go to either island, I'm sure you can park your boat in between.
Yeah, that seems the spot, doesn't it? That's the sweet spot.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I think we've covered enough there for us to be able to put the option out to the mindless ones. Gustavo, what are your current and future projects?
Future projects. Well, I have to do PUNO. I still have to finish it. So I'm working right now on finishing Keiron.
Cool.
Then I will jump into PUNO and finish it hopefully by the end of the year. Have it ready by the beginning of the next year. And then I'm jumping on Mad Robot Comics Saxon second-hand books.
Oh, yeah, of course.
This
cool.
Victorian adventure,
yeah,
which I'm very excited to jump on. It is written by Ash Detman, and Matt is the head of the Mad Robot Comics, Matt Hardy. And after that, I might have one more, but I still can't say anything yet. But yeah, and definitely I'm planning. I don't know how soon I will be able to do it, but the third story, the follow up to PUNO, P. Cuyo, is going to come next year for sure. So that one too. Cool. So the whole story is going to be finished.
Brilliant. Oh, I have to point people in the direction of Crater. So that's available to read free online, crater.com/comic. So there's 4 issues up there so far. Do you know, is it a finite series? How many issues are there going to be?
It's going to be 6 issues.
Cool.
So there's one coming now in November, and the last one is going to be in December.
Brilliant.
And and then I think that 4th, I did most of the work. But number 5 and number 6 are going to be 100% fine.
Nice. Yeah. I tell you what, I really enjoyed the last issue. There's a character appears. I don't think spoilers, but David Pearson.
Okay.
He appeared, and he's one of those characters that you get a feeling who he's going to be in terms of who he is in the story. Do you know what I mean? In terms of who he represents. But I thought he looked brilliant. He was so good because he was both sort of unexpected and expected. He slotted in to the role perfectly. I thought he was absolutely brilliant.
Nice. That's very good to hear.
Oh.
The thing is with Dan Abnett is amazing when he writes. So the first read I usually have of his script, I don't think about anything. I just read it and enjoy it because I'm very curious what's going to happen. So it's like, okay. They go left, they go right. This is what's happening. And then I start doing the research and really think about how could I do this character, how might he look like. And he really trusts his artist. He tells you this character might look like this. He might look like this actor or something like that. He might be on this kind of branch of age, but I'm completely open if you want me to bring something new. So he's always trying to, if you give him something, he might tell, many times he told me, okay, great, let's go with a great idea. And sometimes it's like, no, because he has to fulfill this part, so it really won't work. But just because it doesn't make sense in the whole structure. So it gives you a lot of choice to play with and to play in his sandbox. So because David Pearson was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a big sandbox as well. I mean, I'm not gonna. Yeah. I'll encourage people to go and read it, but it's very expansive in setting.
It's an amazing story.
Yeah, it really is very broad, and there's a lot to consider within the story, which is part of the remit, I think, really.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So where can people catch you online, Gustavo?
I'm basically you just have to type stuff up, which is
you just have Peruvian cyberpunk.
Yeah, Peruvian cyberpunk, and you will find me. It's not that hard. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the usuals. But yeah, actually Peruvian cyberpunk is even easier than my name, and you will find me.
Oh, brilliant. Listen, well, thanks so much for coming on, mate.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been an honor.
Oh, it's been brilliant. Well, I'm This Man, This Pete on Twitter and Instagram. Currently very inactive, but I will pull my finger out. And Mike?
Mike Williams. I'm on Twitter at CthulhuPunk. And I'll probably be tweeting up lots of photos of D&D and some comics that we're swapping next week.
Awesome. Trying to sway the vote. Brilliant. Thank you all. Speak soon.
Till next time.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to my dulcet tones and their northern ramblings. Find out more about the Lakes International Comic Art Festival at comicartfestival.com and find us on Twitter at comicartfestpod or online at comicartpodcast.uk.